As you can see, I back in 2002, the Lord showed me that I'm descended from King David, and I have an amazing life. But I actually wrote down what he showed me. He showed me in my devotions. And what's really interesting is I became a born again Christian on September the 19th, 1971. And this was in Oxnard, California, when Ronald Reagan was governor of California. So I got saved in California when Ronald Reagan was governor, which I find rather interesting because California's really gone downhill since Reagan was governor, in my opinion. But because right now it seems like Lori McBride is running California. With her in charge, you know it's going to be a disaster. She's basically Satan's right-hand person. But I became a born-again Christian, 14 years old, at Oxnard Baptist Temple with Pastor Ed Rothenberger, and my youth director was Joe Bonacisi. It's really funny because there's very little about either of these two online right now. It's like Satan attacked them because they were instrumental in leading me to Jesus, the King. I'm the King David woman. So let's get back onto this. What's really interesting is here's how the Lord showed me. I noticed that what really stood out to me, well, first of all, as you can see from this page, I became a Christian at age 14. And now let's go to the next page. And on the next page, you can see how the Lord used a bunch of numbers. But I especially noticed Matthew chapter 1, the genealogies there, where it says in Matthew 1:17, so all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations, and from David until the carrying away unto Babylon are 14 generations, and from the carrying away into Babylon unto Christ are 14 generations. And I found out this past week that David in Hebrew gematria totals 14. David's name adds up to 14 when each letter is treated as a number. When you go by his Hebrew name, the Dalet in David is number 4. The Wow or the Vav is 6. So it's spelled with Dalet, Wow, Dalet. So that ends up at 4 plus 6 plus 4 equals 14. And I became a Christian. My birthday is September 15th. So I turned 14 September 15th, 1971. I accepted the Lord as my Savior 4 days later, September 19th, 1971. That was like the best day of my life. So I remember the day when I found Jesus. I knew something happened to me when I prayed the sinner's prayer and asked Jesus to save me. I was such a shy girl, and I felt all this love flow into me. I knew that I now had the Holy Spirit in my life, which I didn't have before. But I've always been an unusual child. Even before I accepted the Lord, I was always looking for the Lord. So anyways, so that's amazing. Amazing, And so now let's go to the next page. Here's some other stuff, but that I wrote down on the day that the Lord showed me that I had King David genes. And it was really funny because he showed me when I was 44 years old. I'm 61 years old right now. And when you add up the numbers to the year I was born, 1957, it equals 22. And 22 and 44 are also associated with King David. And you can see that from going. I'm going to have a link to the page that I created and how the Lord showed me I'm from King David. And later I found out from Brain to Brain Communications that I am from King David. So it's just amazing. I've just had an amazing life. And, what's really strange is I really believe that the Lord, I was born in Miami, Florida, at Jackson Memorial Hospital, September 15th, 1957. And I spent all of my life in Florida, and I would go to Tampa every summer to visit my grandfather and my grandmother, my paternal grandparents. And my grandfather was the actual brother of Howard Hughes, though I didn't know it then. I think my grandfather knew, but I'm not sure if he knew. But we found out later that he is the genetic brother of Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes was the product of an out-of-wedlock affair, and to cover it all up, they had his father marry. Apparently, my great-great-grandma, who was Orthodox Jew, or she was the daughter of from an Orthodox Jewish family. That's where my King David genes came from. She got involved in an affair with a Gentile man named Howard Hughes Sr., and she had two, I believe she had two sons with him. One was Howard Hughes, the famous aviator, and then the other was my grandfather. My grandfather, I believe, was born first. I think Howard Hughes was the second. By the time she had her second baby with this Gentile, her Orthodox Jewish family was outraged, and they disowned her. But I guess to save face, they made an arrangement with his family and her family, and they allowed Howard Hughes Sr. to get the younger boy, which was the one who became the famous aviator, Howard Hughes, and the older son, who was my grandfather, ended up with his real mother. Her name was Sabrina. And when you look at her, she looks so Jewish. But she was disowned. She ended up marrying, they made some sort of arrangement because it was a total disgrace. She got pregnant out of wedlock with a non-Jew, a Gentile, and she ended up marrying a man who became, I think he was even a minister for a while. But anyway, so she married a Gentile man who treated her very well, and so my grandfather was raised by his real mother, and Howard Hughes was raised by his real father. So my grandfather was raised by his real mother and a stepdad who adopted him as his own. And Howard Hughes was raised in a different family. And Sabrina looked like a farm girl. So you would not think that she had any relationship to Howard Hughes. And I think that was part of the problem. She got involved in an affair with this high society guy named Howard Hughes Sr., and his high society Gentile family despised this Orthodox Jewish woman that their son got involved with. And then the Orthodox Jewish family despised this high society family that Howard Hughes Sr. got involved with. So the two lovers had a problem because their parents disapproved of the match, and they would not approve of the marriage. And apparently she didn't have the strength to buck the whole system. She didn't have the strength to buck her Orthodox Jewish family, and he didn't have the strength to buck his Gentile high society family. So that's how the two brothers ended up being raised in two different families. They struck some sort of a deal. It was supposed to be kept top secret, and my grandfather was raised Gentile, even though he's Jewish, because his mother was Jewish, so he would be considered Jewish. And my Howard Hughes Jr. was raised in a high society Gentile family. But he was Jewish too, because his mother Sabrina was Jewish. According to Orthodox Judaism, that would make him Jewish. Though, of course, they might have he wasn't practicing Orthodox Judaism, though. So, but genetically, he would be considered Jewish according to Orthodox Judaism. So basically, according to Judaism, I'm not Jewish because my mother is Japanese. She's not Jewish. But according to Jesus, I'm Jewish because the King David genes that I got from my paternal grandfather, Sabrina's son, was very Jewish. He had the King David genes. So to Jesus, I'm Jewish because my genes just lined up King David. And I know it's true that I have King David because look at my life. I was saved at age 14. In Matthew chapter 1, you look at the genealogy of Jesus Christ. When Matthew wrote it, he used midrashic techniques to try to communicate with his fellow Jews to let them know that Jesus Christ was from King David. And that's why when you go through the genealogy in Matthew chapter 1, he's kind of skips, like he'll go from a son to a grandson or a great-grandson, and he'll skip a couple of. In Jewish culture, the word bane means son, but it also means grandson or great-great-grandson. So they don't pay much attention to direct descendancy going in. The Jewish culture, when they communicate truths, they often use illustrations. This is something I'm learning from my Hebrew studies. So I have an amazing life. I literally turned out half King David. And I think God, in his foreknowledge, knew that I would have a heart for him. And so he orchestrated my life so that he could use me. I mean, Jesus would use all of us if he could, but he knows in advance who's going to follow him and who isn't. And he knew in advance that I would try to follow him better than most people follow him. And so he orchestrated a lot of events in my life to let people know that I am the woman I claim to be, half King David. I mean, I've had amazing answers to prayer in my life that I've always known deep down inside that I'm special to Jesus. And it's not because I'm necessarily better than everyone else. If I'm better than everyone else, it's only because I have King David's heart. I'm a woman after God's own heart, and I listen to God. Well, you could be just as special if you would listen to God. So, see, so basically, I've had so many miraculous answers to prayer. Like, I got accepted to Air Force Officers Training School. I turned that down to go to the Lord. I said, Lord, if you want me to go to Bible college, then have something happen at the church service tonight. And that night at church, we had a special guest speaker who had to fly in because he had an illness in his family. He was the executive vice president of Baptist University of America. And he said, I know that I wasn't supposed to be here, but we had an emergency, so here I am. And I'm going to talk about Baptist University and the excuses we make to not do God's will in our life. And I thought, oh boy. And it was like the whole message was tailor-made just for me. It was even based on a passage I'd had in my devotion that evening. And I thought, I only had like $50 on me. I went to Baptist University. The Lord provided. I ended up graduating from there. Then in 1994, when I got a notice from Paramount Studios saying that that I wasn't allowed to write Brent Spiner anymore, because if I did, they would go after me legally for harassment. That was actually Laurie McBride's lawyers who were doing that, the Jesuit lawyers. And the Jesuits were in charge of Paramount at that time. They were the executives, and they were behind it. Brent Spiner wasn't behind it. The real Brent Spiner didn't want me cut out of his life. And so I couldn't write him anymore after that. And I went to God in prayer. I said, Lord, here I am, a married woman, and I've kind of like made love to this guy in my letters. And I said, I've sinned, and now look what's happened. I'm a disgrace to you. He doesn't even, Brett doesn't even acknowledge that he's called me on the phone and made love to me. He's such a coward. And I said, I'm so ashamed. I'm so sorry, Jesus. Please forgive me. And I spent 3 hours crying, asking Jesus to forgive me for daring to accept this heathen into my life. And when I was a born-again Christian and I was like committing adultery in my heart. And 12 hours later, God sent an earthquake to Northridge, California. That was the answer to my prayer. I thought, wow. And then right in the middle of the earthquake, while they were still having the tremors, Brent Spiner got a wiretap on my phone. And I'd pick up my home phone and hear beep, 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 beep. And I thought, oh my goodness. I don't have to worry about writing anymore because I can talk to him on my phone. So I talked to Brett on my phone through the wiretap in the 1990s. And that was an answer to prayer, that earthquake, the Northridge earthquake. I mean, and then we had another earthquake when I lived in Seattle, when I was starting to divorce my husband, because Jesus told me, if you don't do this, you're going to be dead in a couple years. So basically people, I mean, look at this. I accepted the Lord at 14. I'm half King David. You add up the letters to David's name in Hebrew Gematria, it's 14. I'm in Zechariah 9:15. My birthday's 9/15/57. I mean, you can say, oh, that's a coincidence. You know, you can choose to live a life of love and faith. And I found whenever I make a decision based on love and faith, I'm on the path for my life. Whenever I make a decision based on fear and doubt, which is basically what all of Laurie McBride's followers do, you're on Satan's path.